Greetings and welcome to this episode of OLR Connections. In this conversation, Right Worshipful Brother Jason Laramee of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin, Right Worshipful Brother James A. Buckhorn of the Grand Lodge of Indiana, and Right Worshipful Brother Chad Kopenski of the Grand Lodge of Ohio will be discussing the value and the advantages of proper mentorship in Masonry. One of the perspectives or visions that I have when it comes to Masonic education is that, we all the time hear about, 200-300 years ago, how Masonry was different. One of the differences is that the level of educational expectation of a man entering Masonry was quite different, right? Most of the men in those times were already educated in the classics. They already had a pretty sound education and knowledge and philosophy and so forth, not to mention just how to live as a gentleman, so to speak. And I wonder if part of what we are struggling with in our definition of education these days is a lack of that fundamental knowledge. That, you made the comment about how to tie a bow tie. There are things like that. I mean, I've actually had conversations with young brothers about how the proper way to shake a man's hand, things like that. And those are valuable. They are not Masonic education, but they are valuable educations of Masons. So maybe I think I'm building to a question here, which is, how do we distinguish and how much effort should we put into that difference between Masonic education versus education of Masons?
Can I say that it depends probably on the lodge? If you have a lodge that is a lot of young guys that don't have a lot of that experience compared to your standardized mid-60s or your average lodge that has a lot of older gentlemen with life experience, they're not going to need to know how to tie the bow tie, but that younger lodge is. And it probably goes along with what you are trying to accomplish as a lodge too. And does it benefit the bigger group or the lesser group? Are you doing deep dives on stuff like the research lodge compared to the lodge just up the road that has 5 guys that show up, 3 of them are brand new, and they need to know how to do the rod work and where that stuff comes from, where the one that just merged up the road, they got about 10 guys, but every one of them I think is retired that shows up except for one. So you kind of have to tailor what you're looking to do to what the needs are there. And that younger group, there definitely is a need for some of those life skills or those gentleman skills that you're talking about, David.
Masonic education, right? Let's talk about portfolio diversification, right? I think about stocks and bonds, right? What's right for you might not be right for me, right? And so I like Jason's point there. And it is going to be different, right? It's going to be different at every different level. But if we're talking about Masonry as a cultural movement and an institution, the question that kind of springs from that is, it's a question of efficiency for me, right? And that's always the question. What's the most important thing to do? Do we rank things as a fraternity or at the lodge level or at the Grand Lodge level of things that are really critical and need to happen? But on the other side of that, my worry is, do we focus so much on the things that need to happen? Hey, no one knows how to tie a bow tie. 85% of the guys that have come in the last 10 years don't know how to tie a bow tie, right? Random number made up. What if we put all our effort into that? It's where the most need is right now. But what if by doing that, we lose out on doing something else that's actually, secretly more critical, right?
There's 2 things they make me think about. And one, it's just kind of poking holes at certain parts of this.
Do it.
One was, as you were talking about it, I remember hearing there's a podcast once about a can opener, that there were a whole boatload of like these old guys who were upset because, a young person came to them and said, they didn't know how to use a can opener. And they sat there and they lamented about, how in the world is this guy not like blah, 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 blah. And the podcaster was like, what a moment that you missed, right? And here's somebody who's coming to you looking to bridge this gap, showing you this vulnerability that they don't know something. And what do? You basically just sit there and mock him because he doesn't have the same knowledge and life experience that you do. I think that's at play in some of our lodges. The second thing that I hope you understand is that critical thinking, that's not inborn, I don't think. At some point, somebody has to sit you down and help develop that skill to be able to look at a situation, assess the priorities, understand what the priorities are, understand what the options are, and to be able to make that plan going forward. Now, once you kind of have the skills developed, in theory, you can, move it to different scenarios. And how this comes back to Masonry and kind of what Jason was saying and what you were saying is that when a guy comes into lodge, a new person comes in, they're just coming into lodge. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what to ask. They don't know what's available. All they know is that there's somebody in front of them who's telling them, this is the way things are. This is how we do things. They have no reason to question it. And they also don't know where to go. They don't even know that they can question it. So that if education is there to bridge gaps and develop curiosity, the education that in lodges doesn't really do that.
At Grand Lodge a few years ago, we read a letter that complained about a lot of things in Masonry, and you would think it was about the year that we read the letter. No, it was over 100 years old. It's the same problems, right? We're seeing the same problems, the same complaints from brothers. People don't care enough. They're not educated enough. They're puff masons. They're, I guess I would paraphrase to say 0-calorie masons, all the space, but none of the content, right? None of the benefit, none of the energy, right? These are the complaints that were being read 100 years ago, right?
Yeah, but we go back to what I said earlier, is that there's that level of assumption, right? Guys can only pass on what they've been given. And so if we assume they know how to tie a bow tie, or assume that they, know how to use a can opener, I mean, if we've never checked, if we've never said that that's important, if we've never told them, dude, you got to know how to use a can opener, how can we hold them accountable if they don't know how to use a can opener?
One of the things I think is always interesting is that every new Mason will find a mentor. He will find somebody in their lodge or somebody that interacts with to get his advice from. And all too often, it's the wrong person. It's the naysayer in the lodge. So I don't know that that this is would be easy to do, but how do we ensure that Masons are prepared to be good mentors? And I know the short answer is they need to be educated, but now we're a chicken and egg thing here. So how do we ensure at this point in time that our new Masons coming in are getting good mentors, not just the one that's available?
I'm going to answer that in a not nice way, which is that you got to, and this goes to what James was saying. I can't take 100 Masons, put them through the meat grinder, and make them all good mentors. What I need to do is I need to look at a candidate, be like, all right, just knowing this guy, he's going to be a good fit I need to put him with Brad Maxwell. Why? Because Brad's idea, Brad's thought, what Brad can bring to this guy, that's the right thing. I can't put him with James because James has a beard or whatever reason. Like, it's just not going to be the right fit.
Right.
Education can only take somebody so far. Right. And so I need to know, for lack of a better word, kind of where this guy's coming from, and maybe a thought about where he wants to go, whence came him and when he came here to do, and find him the guy to get him there. I can't. Yeah. So the mentors, I can't put them through the Chad Kopenski Mentor Training Academy. I mean, I can hopefully give them a set of tools or maybe some information, but anything more than that, I don't know.
I think the goal is that we have our mentees be taught, I guess to say it as a whole quote, teach them how to think, not what to think. And if that's true, then we just need to find mentors that can embody that, right? That realizes that there's, more than one road on a highway, more than one lane, more than one direction, and that just because someone does something a certain way doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. Mentors need to be confident enough, or I guess they need to relax and realize if you're thinking, oh crap, I'm not ready to be a mentor, you're probably right. But also the fact that you're thinking that is a really great sign. It's not about knowing everything at all. It's, it's about saying, I don't know, let's find out together,
Yeah. And also I think recognizing that as the mentor, you can't give everything to your mentee. That you're right. Like if he's looking for something, I can't give that to you, but they can. Let me help connect you with those guys.
What's the quote from Training Day? I taught you everything you know, but not everything I know. Right.
Right.
It's really not possible. Right. And I think too, going back to the entrance into the lodge, into the fraternity, into the kind of the poolee status of you're a prospective member. We don't even have a petition necessarily, right? I think it really starts there. Not that you can't make, not that it's impossible to fix if the lodge suddenly starts caring after the petition, right? But it's about building all these connections. I always made it very clear in my lodges that you have an assigned mentor. It does not mean that that is the only person you could talk to. And David, if the goal is, hey, we really want this guy to not get bad advice or not get too negative Nellied by, old Fred over there in the corner, right? I don't think the goal is, I don't think the solution is ban that, prevent that from happening overtly. I think you put these controls into place that naturally let it happen. And maybe it should happen, right? Maybe there should be a chance that he Googles something and does the wrong thing, right? He picks up an Ohio literature and he's a Kentucky or Indiana Mason and he starts holding his hand a certain way during prayers because he saw it on the internet and thinks it's cool, but can't explain it, right? It's not necessarily things we need to ban. We need to take the risk, I think. I think if a different guy, if you have 3 different investigators that meet him one-on-one, if you have a crossfire coach, a question and answer coach for each degree, and if you have an overarching mentor, that's 7 connections already that are impossible to not have if that's the way your plan is laid out, right? But
the goal is different, right? I mean, I don't know. I keep going back to this phrase of enlighten and empower. And something to your point that you had previously, it's got to be okay for us to say that you'd be a great Mason, just not in this lodge.
Yeah.
Let me help you get to the right lodge for you. Or that for us to be able to say, it's okay if all you want out of Masonry is, Mrs. Kopenski's apple pie that she brings to, every meeting. That's okay if that's all you want. But, we here at this lodge, we do differently. Or if you want more, let me get you over here. We have to, I think so much of what we've been doing, it has been about, I need to make a member for my lodge. I need those numbers, as opposed to, I want to invest in this guy and make him a good Mason, regardless of whether he's in my lodge or not.
It's hard push sales instead of a two-way interview. I completely and violently agree. My solution at some level to that was that when I was master of Pentalpha, I said, gentlemen, if someone reaches out and we meet him and we start to go through this process and we realize this is not what his heart really wants, our job isn't to make him a Pentalpha Mason. Our job is to put him at the lodge that will give him the best chance of having a good experience, as long as he's a good fit for the fraternity in any way, right? It's possible you could have someone come that's not a good fit for the fraternity, right? And then on the other side, right, you have lodges where, what does Roger Van Gordon say? The Westgates become a turnstile, right? Right.
And I will say that at the level that you and you two are operating at, and I did, that was a really hard obstacle to overcome, was to get Grand Lodges and to get lodges, even the individual Mason, to say that it's okay to say no, or say that, yeah, you're not the right fit. We're not the right fit for here, but you are a good fit over there. But then it goes to something we've all been talking about, that also means that a lodge has to know what a right fit for their lodge is.
Right.
That was the education program I literally did just last month at my lodge. Was here's what I did. The conversation I had was, I said, guys, I've been, when I was younger in Masonry, I would always answer hell yes to both of these questions. But now I find, as I'm older in Masonry, I don't think I can answer this question without you. So I need to come to you to help me develop the answer to this. I just had a guy last week, someone came to me and said, should I be a Mason and should I be a member of your lodge? And I said, when I was younger, I'd say, hell yeah, come on in. But now I want to have that conversation with you. Should I be a Mason? And I said, like, okay, what do you think of? Like, what's that little rubric you make in your mind of, well, this dude, should he be a Mason? Like, what's my things he has to tick off? And guys had different thoughts about that. But then when I said, well, what about our lodge? Should I even be a member of your lodge? That was a very awkward conversation for our lodge to have, truthfully. It got better, but it was a good conversation for them to say, well, we like this and we do this. And I guess the right guy for our lodge is this. But a lot of guys said, I don't know. And they also said that they didn't know the other lodges, so they wanted to travel more. But I've kind of come full circle, which is that kind of need to know who we are and what we do.
The real idea is that people sit down and they realize this isn't about checking the boxes.
Yeah.
Just in the same way that you don't always necessarily agree to something knowing the full implications of it. For example, there are things in our degree work you agree to before you really know. And part of that is based on trusting that the people around you wouldn't let you go through something that would be objectionable, right? Yeah, Chad, it's all about connection. And I think a lot of lodges are doing it backwards, where the number is more important than the quality, right? And it's not even, and I'm not even necessarily saying we're letting bad people in, but we're letting people in and we're not investing into them, right?
Agreed.
Would you rather spend an hour mentoring 100 guys or 100 hours mentoring one guy, right? Well, with the previous, right, that's kind of where we're at in a lot of places. And the numbers game kind of works in the favor in some ways, because you're going to find a diamond in the rough, hopefully, right? And that's, with bringing a lot of guys in and the push for membership, it's hard to argue against the fact that, yeah, we got a few good guys out of it. A lot of guys stopped coming after a year, 2 years, but one guy became a 50-year member, right? And is that because we're so good at the onboarding and cementing process, right? Cementing these guys to the fraternity? Or is it just statistics and numbers, right? I don't want it to be about the numbers, right? I mean, I'd love if every lodge brought in 5 guys a year, mentored them. They don't even need to have great mentors, decent mentors, right? Not about checking the box, but hey, if your lodge sits down and puts a plan together and says, hey, instead of sending 3 old guys that are, from the same occupation, or, they're all retired Army or something, right? For example, to interview a guy, let me pick strategically 3 really different guys that I think, for whatever reason, will be a good fit. And I have a good gut for this because I've gotten to know this guy and not just said, hey,
Right.
Thanks for the petition. Thanks for walking into our lodge tonight. We've never seen you before. This is the process. We'll read it. Or being too cryptic and saying, thanks for the petition. Someone will be in touch at some point in the future.
Don't bring a guy into lodge unless you would first want him as a friend. There's a document in Ohio called the 5 Guideposts for supporting a membership. And the first one is, friendship first. Don't bring a guy in unless you trust him to drive your wife to the doctor. One thing you said, and then I'm going to point at Jason, because I know I like Jason. what Hrinko is doing right now, Hrinko's writing a book in which he is taking arts and sciences mentoring that they do for their candidates, and he's kind of he's codifying it and saying this is the way to do good candidate mentoring. And there's part of that that I really like, but there's also part of it that kind of goes back to what you're saying, James. Like, it's more than ritual. It's more than history. It's more than meh. You know, I think about Jason, about you and the guy who helped you post. I mean, that relationship that, you know, that meant a lot to you as you were coming up through the degrees.
Oh, very much so. That was the reason I joined Masonry. Was this is such a great person, and having him help me through it, and going to his house and spending the first half hour talking about what was going on in life and how he was doing, and then he showed me his wood shop, and just the things that I've learned about Curtis, my mentor, during just the mentorship process was incredible. And I've tried to do that with other people. The last one the one I'm working on now, he's a master mason, but we're still working on his mentorship for the master mason degree. But it took us a year to go from entered apprentice to fellowcraft, and he and I probably have 70 hours of time at the lodge doing that mentorship process, where the first part, how's work this week, how's life, what's going on with this, then we talk about something esoteric or things like that, and then it's like, oh crap, I gotta leave in 15 minutes, let's do the posting real quick, and stuff like that. But we went from the very beginning of the knocking on the door for the entered apprentice degree all the way through, and what everything meant, and what it meant to him, and what it meant to me, and then discussing what it meant to both of us like we are now. So no, that mentorship is what does it.
I will say that one of the things that has been nice getting in when I was education chair was all of a sudden recognizing that there's an entire world outside of Ohio. I mean, as I was trying to learn about what Ohio was, because it's 25 districts and they're all very different, all of a sudden I did get connected through Charlie, you know, to guys from the Midwest Conference. Like all of a sudden I met, you know, Chad Lasik and Spencer Hammond and RJ Johnson from Illinois. And, you know, through them, I meet the guys from Virginia. And, you know, that being able to, and this sounds really obnoxious, but to get at that higher level, right? To all of a sudden get at the table with the guys who are in similar positions outside of there. I found conversations with guys like, you know, with James, with you, Jason, with, you know, with RJ from Illinois, with Andy Niemeyer from Minnesota, from the Thompsons out of Missouri. Like those were mentoring to me too. Even just how to play Masonic chess, how to see what else was out there and what might work in Masonry. Like it's, yeah, I got so much out of those connections and those conversations by recognizing that there's an entire world out there that I had not even remotely begun to plug into. So.
Speak on my most recent mentor, and we'll probably should mute Chad, because within an hour of my first taking over the chairmanship, Jim Goldsmith from lodge that Chad plurals says, you need to meet this person. He does what you're going to do, but that's in Ohio. So that very beginning, Chad started with, have you seen this? Do you know this? Have you met this person? So I had a really good mentorship role with you that's on this call. That's, you know, and it lasts to the day. I still have, hey, something happened the other day and I called you and we talked about it and you gave me your opinion, and I could see part of what was going on, you know, that kind of stuff. But that mentorship is still here.